Hey everybody, Real Estate Ninja here. Hope you're doing great. We're going to talk about Airbnbs. We're going to talk about the collapse of Airbnb. We're going to specifically talk about a city in Texas, Dallas, how Airbnbs have been banned and how it's going to affect the real estate market. Now, if you don't live in Dallas, it still pertains to you and your real estate investing hopes and dreams because this is a big story. Check this out. Dallas ban has Airbnb short-term rental owners facing tough business decisions. To say tough is an understatement. Look, so many years ago, I remember people in my own state of California buying up Airbnbs, watching them do this, people that I personally knew, and their margins were so tight. Now, let's say they bought 4 or 5 years ago, those margins got a little bit looser. Why? Because the value of the property went up and in their mind they were richer, right? But their payments hadn't changed. Interest rates did fall, let's say from 2017, 2018 down into the 2020 era when interest rates fell from, let's say, 4% down to the threes. And so they refied and they were doing good, but they were only one part of this problem. We had people buying more Airbnbs, more and more, right? As interest rates fell, people were able to go and find more properties, leverage more, and they were going out and not just buying one or two. There were people that I've seen buying 10 or 20 Airbnbs. As a matter of fact, we saw news stories all around the country about that kind of scenario, right? Well, check this out. Think about if this happened to Airbnb owners in other cities, or what is about to happen in Dallas to the real estate market. It says, as thousands of Dallas short-term rental owners process the city ban, some say they are moving out of state and others are considering a legal challenge. In May of 2016, at 69 years old, real estate agent Sharon Sadaka sold a dilapidated duplex in Old East Dallas to a Salvadorian man, 2 decades her junior, who spoke little English. The man had promised to fix it up, but when he couldn't find any buyers, she assured him she could help him manage the property as an Airbnb. The two became unlikely business partners and even unlikelier friends. 7 years later, at 76, Sadaka and her partner have seen college interns, tattoo convention goers, visiting relatives, and all sorts of guests at the Airbnb. It's kept her busy and provided her with a stream of income. But a few years ago, the city passed a ban on most short-term rentals in Dallas. Now Sadaka is confused. She says, I'm still seeking answers because there's nothing is clear at this point. She tried to study the Dallas City Code and has been on the phone with Airbnb for hours, but the company ultimately routed her back to the city. She still doesn't know how and when the city's ban will impact her business in Dallas, where the city says there are about 1,000 registered STRs in single-family neighborhoods. Sadaka is one of thousands of Airbnb owners, rental operators, cleaners, and other workers who rely on short-term rental properties, or STRs, as a vital source of income. They are in a state of flux, with some scrambling to move operations and livelihoods out of state because of the court battle. It says here, you can't put roughly 1,700 entrepreneurs out of business in one fell swoop who are obeying the law. Isn't that interesting that somebody would think that? You just can't do that. When we see all throughout history, laws change, laws be modified, companies go under, companies lay people off. You know, the business cycle is always evolving and moving. And this is something that was actually pretty easy to see, that after a while, communities would start getting upset and start petitioning local government, city councils to ban short-term rentals or limit short-term rentals. I mean, it just makes sense. Who wants to live on a street where all of a sudden all of the homes around them turn into party houses where people are coming and going? They don't really care about you or your feelings. Think about that. It just makes sense. But to so many people that dive into real estate, they don't think of the obvious. It absolutely blows me away. But right now it says that there's a possible legal fight that people are going to sue, and that makes sense, and they're going to do that. But are they going to win? Ultimately, the one or two might win, but these counties and city governments, they actually have a lot of backing from their citizens that petition for them to stop this in the first place. Think about just Dallas. When they have 1,000 of these short-term rentals and they ban them, that is almost 1,000 properties that are ultimately going to hit the market. You have to understand the reason why. Short-term rentals are a pretty new thing, and most of them were bought in an era where the properties were financed under a certain amount, because, or sorry, the interest rates, you know, the whole property worked based on them bringing in a certain amount of cash flow. And that's the problem with most real estate investors. And even if, let's say, and I know this for certain, there's an investor that bought a short-term rental, and they set it up with, and they had it, you know, they said, okay, it's going to rent for X amount per day, which means I'm going to be bringing in X amount per month, you know, and I'll take a certain amount of loss. I figure, you know, I'm going to have like a 20% vacancy rate. And it's working at this rate at 3% or at 4%, let's say. But what happened is, as times went on, they went and bought a couple more. They got themselves a little bit more leverage. So even that, though that one's cash flowing really well, it's now having to make up for the losses the others are taking. Well, what will happen is it will eventually squeeze the owner-operator, into starting to liquidate properties. Not only that, especially because a lot of short-term rental operators never imagined, or they never bought the property right. I talk about this in the real estate crash course, where you have to be able to make money 5 different ways from a property, and also you have to have a worst-case scenario. And the worst-case scenario for short-term rental is the payment, the principal, interest, taxes, insurance are low enough to where I can turn into a long-term rental. But very few people think that way when they go into a business venture. They don't think of worst case scenario, right? That's why all of my businesses have always made money. I've made mistakes, but my businesses have always cash flowed because I always built them based off of worst case scenarios. And when the best case scenarios happened, I was flush with cash and I was able to save that, pay down debt, or go into bigger operations, right? But that's the thing with real estate. Most people don't do that. They get themselves over leveraged. Or let's say they're real estate portfolio is working well, they get themselves over leveraged somewhere else, and they start having problems with debt. Like maybe, hey, they're buying Porsches that they can't afford, or boats they can't afford, or going on crazy vacations. They don't have a ton of money in the bank, and when something tight happens, all of a sudden they find themselves racing back to the bank for asking for loans, and they're denied. And so that's what's happening right now. So you're going to see a lot of these short-term rentals convert into sales. The same thing is happening in Florida right now, where I'm seeing places going up for sale that are fully furnished. You know that they're Airbnbs, and they even admit, hey, this could be an Airbnb for you. And investors are walking in going, I read the news headlines. That's the thing. Think about that. As more and more of these news headlines come in, and you're starting to see a lot of stuff about VRBO and Airbnb, it's really going to put a bad taste in so many new investors' mouths that they're going to be looking to buy that property for something else, more than likely a long-term rental. But even that fact that we're having more long-term rentals hitting the market is now taking the cost of rents, the value of rents, and diving them down. So that's an even nicer, better conundrum. But for people like you and me that have been waiting on the sidelines, that gets exciting. And that's when we know we're going to make the most for our buck. Guys, the fact of the matter is Airbnb is falling, and it's going to be falling fast. And going into this, quote unquote, they're going to finally call it a recession. We already know we are, and it's priced into it right now. We're going to see even better deals down the road. Guys, I hope you got something out of this. Thank you so much for watching. Real Estate Ninja is out.